They were only 40 miles from freedom, cold, starving, hunted. They had crossed rivers, climbed mountains, fought soldiers at every turn, and still they kept going. Over 1,000 miles of land behind them, and just ahead, the Canadian border. But the snows came early, and so did the U.S. Army. In the freezing winds of the Bear Paw Mountains, Chief Joseph stood and looked around. His people, what remained of them, were starving, freezing, and dying. He had done everything he could to keep them alive. And now there was nothing left to do but stop. "I am tired of fighting," he said. "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." And with that, the Nez Perce War ended, not with a treaty or a bullet, but with a broken promise in the snow. The story didn't begin in battle. It began in betrayal. The Nez Perce were once considered friends to the United States. They had welcomed Lewis and Clark in 1805, helped them survive in the mountains, shared their horses, food, and shelter. In return, the Americans promised peace. But as more settlers came west, that promise wore thin. In 1855, the U.S. government signed a treaty granting the Nez Perce a vast territory across present-day Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. It recognized their sovereignty, their land, their right to exist. Then, in 1860, gold was discovered, and everything changed. Suddenly, settlers flooded the region. Violence erupted. The government pushed a new treaty, one that stripped away 90% of the Nez Perce's land. Most tribal leaders, under pressure, signed it. But not all. Among the holdouts were a group known as the Non-Treaty Nez Perce, led by Chief Joseph and others like Looking Glass and Whitebird. They refused to give up the Wallowa Valley in Oregon, land where their ancestors were buried. They had no desire for war, but they would not leave. Chief Joseph, known to his people as Heinmot Tuyalakekt, was not a war chief in the traditional sense. He was a man of reason, a speaker, a negotiator, a thinker. His father had warned him never to sell the land of their people. As pressure mounted, Joseph hoped to avoid bloodshed. In 1877, the government ordered all non-treaty Nez Perce to move to the reservation at Lapwai, Idaho. The deadline was 30 days. Joseph tried, he pleaded, he delayed, but time ran out. When 3 young Nez Perce warriors, acting out of grief and rage, killed several white settlers, the army moved in, fast and hard. And just like that, there was no turning back. On June 17, 1877, U.S. troops under Captain David Perry attacked Joseph's camp in Whitebird Canyon. They expected a swift victory. Instead, the army was routed. 34 soldiers died. Only 2 Nez Perce were killed. It was a shocking defeat, and it marked the beginning of a legendary retreat, a tactical, grueling flight across some of the harshest terrain in North America. The Nez Perce didn't run blindly. They moved with discipline and strategy. Over 750 people, men, women, elders, and children, traveled together, escorted by fewer than 200 warriors. They hoped to reach the Great Plains, find allies among other tribes, or perhaps escape into Canada. What followed was a 3.5-month journey covering more than 1,170 miles through Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. Along the way, they fought and won against overwhelming odds. At the Battle of the Clearwater in Idaho, they faced General Oliver O. Howard and a much larger force. They held them off, then slipped away into the mountains. At Big Hole in Montana, they were ambushed while camped. Over 90 Nez Perce, including many women and children, were killed. But the survivors regrouped and counterattacked, driving off the soldiers. At Canyon Creek, they fought off cavalry under Colonel Samuel Sturgis. Time and again, the army tried to pin them down. Time and again, they escaped, navigating mountain passes, fording rivers, crossing Yellowstone. Even in retreat, Their resistance was disciplined, brilliant. General William Tecumseh Sherman himself wrote that the Indians throughout displayed a courage and skill that elicited universal praise. They fought with almost scientific skill. But the hardship was immense. There were no supply lines, no winter coats. Children cried from hunger. Elders died along the trail. Horses collapsed from exhaustion. And yet, they kept going. They crossed the Yellowstone River, moved north. The Canadian border was within reach. Sitting Bull and the Lakota had found refuge there. The Nez Perce believed they could too. But General Nelson Miles had been dispatched to intercept them. With over 600 men, he moved quickly and cornered the Nez Perce in the Bear Paw Mountains, just 40 miles from Canada. It was the beginning of the end. On September 30th, 1877, Miles launched a surprise attack. Gunfire tore through the Nez Perce camp. Warriors fought back fiercely. Women and children dug into the snow, trying to survive. For 5 days, the Nez Perce held out, cold, surrounded, outnumbered, yet still resisting. Then Looking Glass was killed. Then the people began to starve. Joseph, heartbroken, realized what had to be done. He approached the American lines with a white flag. What happened next became one of the most iconic moments in Native American history. Joseph stood in the snow and gave his surrender speech, not to a crowd, not to a reporter, but directly to the officers who had pursued him. "I am tired of fighting," he said. "Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. Tuhulhul Sote is dead. The old men are all dead. It is the young men who say yes or no. He who led on the young men is dead. It is cold, and we have no blankets. The little children are freezing to death. My people, some of them, have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food. No one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. I want to have time to look for my children and see how many I can find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." The war was over. 418 Nez Perce surrendered at Bear Paw. But for Joseph, surrender was not peace. He was promised he and his people could return to the Wallowa Valley. That promise was broken. Instead, they were sent by train to Leavenworth Prison in Kansas. Disease spread. Conditions were horrific. Later, they were moved to Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. Nearly 1/3 of them died in captivity. Joseph continued to petition for their return. He traveled to Washington, met with President Hayes, President Arthur, and later President Roosevelt. He gave speeches, appealed to journalists, wrote letters. "I am tired of talk that comes to nothing," he said. "It makes my heart sick when I remember all the good words and broken promises." In 1885, the government finally allowed some of the Nez Perce to relocate to the Lapwai Reservation in Idaho, but not Joseph. He and about 150 of his followers were sent to the Colville Reservation in Washington, hundreds of miles from their homeland. He died there on September 21, 1904. The doctor wrote that he died of a broken heart. Chief Joseph is remembered today as one of the most dignified, courageous leaders of the American frontier. He was not a conqueror. He was not a savage. He was a man forced to protect his people the only way he could. Through it all, he held on to his principles. Even in defeat, he stood with honor. And when he surrendered, he did not beg. He spoke. And his words still echo through history. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.